So thank you so much for joining me here today. I'd like to start by having you introduce yourself and your role here at the University of Michigan.
Well, my name is Kira Berman, and I work for the Natural History Museum at the University of Michigan. I'm the Assistant Director for Education, which means I head up the Education Department at the museum.
And so I'd like to sort of focus on your experiences in that role. What's it like to work at the Natural History Museum here?
Well, I get to do a lot of different things and work with a lot of different people. So we work with the public, families, and students who come into the museum. We work with undergraduate courses, sometimes teaching them science content, other times teaching them science communication skills. We work with graduate students and faculty on their science communication and on how to speak with our audiences. And we also get to work with adults during lectures and science cafes and other kinds of programs.
Absolutely. So you work with a lot of different types of audiences. And in your role as the Assistant Director for Education, what are some of the rewards and challenges with working with all of these different audiences?
I think one of the rewards that we always find is when people begin to understand an area of science for the first time, when they have a first-hand experience with a phenomena or with objects. That's always very rewarding, and you can see people get excited, you can see their eyes light up, you can see that moment when they understand something for the first time. That's the reward. That's why we come to work.
Absolutely, that makes a lot of sense. What are some challenges associated with this position?
I think one of the challenges in general in the field of informal education is finding ways to make science accessible and fun and exciting to so many people. In particular, I think that it's very important that people understand the science research that gets done at the university in order to participate more fully in society.
Absolutely, I completely agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you would say that the key challenge is trying to figure out how to work with researchers to become more adept at communicating with broad audiences?
That's one of the challenges in working with researchers, but I think as to the broader question, the question is how do we bring people into the fold so that they actually consider themselves as somebody who's good at science, as somebody who enjoys science, as somebody who is going to seek out scientific information. That's an affective goal, and it is a challenge.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think that those goals are really fascinating goals from the perspective of what you're doing as an informal science educator. What do you think brings people into the museum, and what kinds of goals do you think that they have such that you've sort of set these goals to align?
Well, I think we have so many different audiences who come in for different reasons, but most people come to a museum, at least partially, to have a social interaction. So there are parents coming in with children, there's students coming in with each other, even our school groups that come on a class field trip are there in part because they want to do something fun together that's different and outside the classroom.
Sure, and engage in learning in a different way.
Exactly so.
So you're feeding sort of an element of curiosity at the same time as creating an opportunity for people to have fun. Is that accurate?
I hope we're not just feeding curiosity. I hope we're fostering it.
Absolutely.
I hope we're expanding it so that the people really are motivated to, when they leave the museum, to learn more about something that they have gotten an inkling from.
So you mentioned that you work with a number of different types of groups, everyone from families to graduate students and researchers to youth. Can you talk for just a little bit about what it's like to interact with each of these groups separately and how they're different from each other?
Sure. I think that I'll start with families.
Okay.
When families are coming in to the museum for a visit, parents like to interact with their children. They want to have the experience of showing their children something they've never seen before. It's very important. And so giving them space to frame that interaction is very important. When parents and children come to a researcher who has set up a table in our space for some sort of informal activity, it really is, it's imperative that the parent and child have a chance to interact at that table. Together and with each other, not just with the researcher.
Interesting,
and so that because we know that's a goal of their coming to the museum, we try to find ways for that to happen. For our faculty and our graduate students who come to us to learn science communication, we want that experience to be a positive one. So we want them to be having fun and expressing their personality while they're working with the families or with the students who are at the museum. And of course, they've got a much longer attention span, and they're there in part for some structured workshops and in part to learn by practicing. And for the university students who come, likewise, we want to open their eyes with surprising objects and with science phenomena that they may not have seen before. So they're different. I think we go in different directions based on the audiences. One thing I will say is that anyone who works with children knows this. Little kids are not afraid to be wrong. As we grow older, we have more and more inhibitions. So we need to provide, when we work with adults and older students, we need to provide some ways for them to interact without fearing that they have the wrong answer.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. And so part of it is also scaffolding the activity such that it's more about exploration than finding an answer. Is that accurate?
Yeah, or asking a question with many answers to encourage people to answer.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about this. I know that you run a training program for science communication. It's a fellows program, correct?
That's right.
So I'm a little bit curious, when you're working with researchers and graduate students and faculty to interact with your museum audiences, what kinds of advice do you give them to interact with the families that come into the museum?
Well, we look at different kinds of invitations and exploratory questions. We build, during our workshop, a toolbox of ways to make an interaction memorable. And we build it from our own experiences. So we know what we remember, so we can use those experiences to try to create memorable experiences for our audience. So, for example, it might be a challenge, or it might be a surprise, or it might be a sense of getting special access to something. Those are the kinds of things, the kinds of tools that we use. Maybe it's getting to touch something that is 2 billion years old. Or maybe it's seeing some technology that feels like it's from the future.
So it's a lot of different types of experiences, but it's really, the intent is to pull them in and to engage.
That's right.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing your perspective on this. This was really helpful and really valuable to us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks for inviting me.